Dr. Doberman, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Dan.
Doctor, are you seeing a lot of people seeking help in this economic downturn in terms of their being vulnerable to this economy and they're panicking?
Yeah, I think we see here in the office, and I think the statistics follow nationally, that there is a greater desire to access mental health services just because of the stressors that everybody's feeling.
Talk about this for a second, Doc. What sort of feelings do people go through when they lose their jobs or when they're economically challenged or threatened?
Well, let's take your word threatened, because when we're threatened by anything, we fall into a self-protective style of behavior. And it's important for us to do that because we need to protect ourselves when we're under threat. Something is attacking us. So, we'll tend to mobilize. So we'll tend to maybe feel anxious. We'll tend to get hypervigilant. And if we can affect that stress by our energies and by our vigilance, our stress will go down. The problem is in situations which are out of your control, when you lose your job, when your home is threatened, when your economic stability is threatened, if you feel that none of your efforts can pay off, none of your efforts can relieve that stress, well then you get into a sense of panic, you get a sense of sadness or depression, you get a sense of paralysis. So it very much depends upon your viewpoint of your ability to affect that status, as well as how rapidly it occurs to you.
Sure, but some of those feelings are fine, right? I mean, panicking, good panic, there's good panic, right? I mean, it's not all bad.
Yeah, well, let's think about there's different kinds of stress. There's good stress and there's bad stress. Stress is mobilizing. So for someone who has worked in a job which maybe they haven't liked, and but they've stayed in it because they're complacent or they're kind of easygoing, well, if they get let go and they're stressed, it may cause them, if they can find another position, to actually wind up with a better sense of well-being. So, stress and response to threat are there because they're self-preserving ways of behaving. So it's not mentally unhealthy to feel these things. On the contrary, it's self-protective. It's only when those protections get exaggerated and we get stuck with them that it becomes a problem.
Sometimes people go into those slippery slopes. At what point does it require you to seek professional help? Like, for example, seeing a psychologist?
Well, number one, they probably don't need a psychologist, and they probably don't need a doctor. They need a good listener, they need a compassionate friend, a good spiritual advisor. But if they do need mental health services, it is available. But how do you know whether you need them? I think if you're feeling that you have no energy to take charge of your life experience, if you feel totally overwhelmed so you can't move forward, if you're unable to take opportunities that are coming up to you, if you start feeling irritable when with loved ones who normally you're in a better place with, if your sleep is disturbed, either too much sleep or inability to sleep. A significant one is if you find yourself abusing substances like alcohol. Those are all warning signs that this threat is becoming a survival issue to you, and you're not feeling able to survive within it.
Well, what about this? How does losing a job impact the people in the family, the children, the wife?
Well, it's important that a husband and wife, if it's a two-parent family or the significant parents within a family, try to understand their reactions before they try to describe this to the kids. Kids will be very sensitive to changes in routine, changes in irritability in the parents. So it is a family, it is very correctly, Dan, a family issue, and a family mobilizes around it. When we have things like a job and we have things like a regular paycheck, we tend not to be appreciative of them. It's when we lose those stable elements that we tend to get very appreciative.
Sure. Doctor, it's been said that losing a job, losing an income is third from losing a loved one, losing, for example, getting married or getting divorced, is like the third most stressful thing that can happen to somebody. Is that true?
When you do hierarchies of stress, certainly moves of family, losses of jobs, losing individuals, I think the degree of difference between them is very small. Those are all major saddening events in people's lives, major disorganizing events in people's lives. And it's the support systems and how we approach those that can moderate those effects.
What kind of advice would you give to someone to help start the process of dealing with the reality of losing their job? And they're the kind of person who's living paycheck to paycheck, and they're just, now it's happening to them. What advice would you give them right now?
Well, I think the first thing is to understand that whatever fear you're feeling is very, very appropriate. You are not mentally unhealthy by a feeling of fear. You're not unmasculine or unfeminine by feeling fear. If you know you're living paycheck to paycheck and you've lost that paycheck, it's a frightening experience, number one. Number two, I'd ask them to try to stop for a moment, get on top of that fear if we can, and try to look at what their assets are. You know, not necessarily only financial assets, but family assets, skill assets. You know, most people are much more gifted than they give themselves an opportunity to believe.
Sure they are.
And they have many more talents and values. And it can be at this moment that those things can, you know, it can cause you to become exceedingly creative, exceedingly entrepreneurial, in service of your own best needs. But I think it's the ability to inhibit that first rush of anxiety, and then to step back and say, okay, what in the real world is available to me? And then to make sure they access those safety net systems that local, state, and federal governments, as well as charitable organizations, provide. You know, this isn't a time for pride. It's really a time to say, hey, there's a lot of people in this situation, and there's nothing wrong with me for being in it.
Absolutely. Resources. Lastly, Doc, resources. Let's say, you know, this person doesn't have health care, health insurance anymore, and they are slipping into depression, and they are slipping into those scary areas where they don't want to be. Well, you know, a lot of them, I don't have health insurance, so I can't get to a doctor, or I can't get to this person. How do they deal with that? I mean,
well, I think you're asking two questions.
Okay, yeah.
You're asking, how do I deal with my thought that I don't have any resources, and then what resources are available if I don't have any?
Absolutely.
I think the first thing is to recognize that you do have resources. They may come from non-traditional sources, because if you've always had income, you haven't had to access these. So what would we look at? We would look at the various religious service organizations that are in town. We would look to the schools. You know, the schools have mental health services for kids, and really, in doing that, supportive of families. We can look towards the county mental health clinics, which are available for residents of the county without regard to income. So I believe those sources are there, but I would also look at the networks of friendships and family, and in the very local community, because that's what we derive our best sense of self from.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Doberman from Carner Psychological Associates in upstate New York, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.